Excuse me. Thank you for being here. Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Williams, and I'm Adult and Community Services Manager with the Columbia Public Library. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. We'll be learning about conspiracy theories, which is a particularly important topic during this presidential election year. Today's Lunch and Learn is co-hosted by the library and the League of Women Voters of Columbia-Boone County. We do have people attending both in person and on Zoom. We had more than 35 folks register online, so thank you all for joining us from home or your office. Just a couple of Zoom housekeeping items for those watching over Zoom. If you are on Zoom and want to ask a question during the Q&A portion of the event, please use the chat feature. And we ask that you use the drop-down menu in the chat to select everyone so that everyone online can see your question and so they know what's been asked. We appreciate that. And for those in the room, I've got this microphone. I will walk around and so that you can ask your questions that can be heard both in the room and on Zoom. We are recording today's presentation, so it will be available in the next day or two on both the League's YouTube channel and the library's YouTube channel for future viewing. I also be remiss if I didn't point out in this conversation about factual information and finding good information online in particular. In the back, we have a handout about our reference databases and e-resources online. We have access to all kinds of things, familiar resources like encyclopedias and so on, but other databases full of articles that are vetted and trusted sources of information. So pick one of those up if you'd like. All right, and I now will turn things over to the League of Women Voters, Laurie Scala, who's our speaker.
Thank you, Lauren, very much. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Christopher A. Connor, who's Assistant Professor of Sociology at the University of Missouri. He's author of numerous journal articles, books, and anthologies. He's currently finishing an edited volume titled Conspiracism and Extremist Beliefs in New Times, which will be available this coming summer through Rowman and Littlefield Lexington Books. His research areas include the sociology of culture, criminology, and social theory. So welcome, everyone, and welcome to our speaker.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for the lovely introduction. You know, I've done this talk a number of times, but this is probably the first time I've done it in Columbia. So, yeah. Is it? How's that? Oh, yeah. Hey, there we go. So yeah, for the past 3.5 years or so, I've been immersed in this right-wing conspiracy known as QAnon. Just kind of curious, how many of y'all have heard of QAnon? Okay, everybody. Sometimes you would be surprised when I talk. I do give a kind of miniature version of this talk in my classes, and my students have not heard of this, so it's kind of remarkable. Make of that what you will. I'm not going to say anything more. But the title of my presentation today is The Perfect Storm: Radicalization in the Age of Social Media. One of the things that's interesting to me about this kind of golden age of conspiracism that we live in is that it's really kind of only possible with the development of social media. So while I do talk a lot about QAnon and what it is, I'm really interested in this broader phenomenon that is social media and the internet and how it's impacting us just as we are impacting it. So I just want to go over exactly what QAnon is and the ideas that it proposes. But QAnon first started in October of
People online having for certain reasons, sorry.
Oh, no worries. How's that? Can you hear me better now? Okay. Let me know if I need to adjust anything and we'll make it happen. So QAnon first started in the anonymous message board known as 4chan, which is a site where people post anonymous messages, and all I will say is it gets pretty interesting on those sites. But Q emerged as this anonymous poster claiming they had secret intelligence that they were releasing from the government about a secret war that Donald Trump was engaged in with a pedophilic cabal known as the Deep State. And the name QAnon takes its name from Q, who's the anonymous poster and kind of leader of this movement, and Anons, who are the other anonymous message board posters on 4chan. So to give you this is what, so this is a process called baking. So Q releases what are known as crumbs, and these crumbs are gathered up by people who call themselves bakers, who then basically try to make sense of Q's posting. Q uses a very kind of Socratic method of questioning and just kind of throwing information out there to basically see what fits. There's roughly, I think, 5,000 Q drops. I'm rounding there. It's something like 4,700 and something. But here you can see he's talking about, so Q posts this anonymous post, he signs it as Q, and the bakers take these pieces of information, and what they try to do is they try to make sense of it, right? What is Q trying to communicate to us? And one of the big ways that they did this was by looking at Donald Trump's Twitter account and trying to make inferences from what Q was posting and relating it somehow to Trump's Twitter post. So in this Q drop, the message or the word tarmac appears. The word tarmac also appears in Donald Trump's post. And they're trying to line up the date and time at which Q posted this drop to when Trump tweeted that post. If this is getting a little confusing, I totally understand. Basically, they're looking for clues outside of Q's post to make sense of it, right? So they're trying to interpret the world using this kind of belief system that they've crafted for themselves to explain everything happening in the world. How many of you heard about the Taylor Swift conspiracy theory with the Super Bowl? I'm having a little bit of fun looking through some of the posts that people are talking about. But it was alleged, right, that Taylor Swift was part of this deep state conspiracy and that she was a psyop meant to basically sway or steal the votes for President Biden, right? To influence young voters. This really started out on QAnon accounts that I follow. So I've been following for a lot longer than most of the general public. But this is the kind of process that believers in QAnon engage in, right? They try to make sense of the world around them according to this kind of mythos that they built, right? All right, so the cabal. So the cabal are the enemies of Donald Trump. They are the deep state. There's these pedophilic cabal that is going around engaging in human trafficking to harvest the adrenal glands of children to produce a substance known as adrenochrome, right? So adrenochrome is actually a real drug. Unfortunately, it's not the cure-all that the believers of QAnon make it out to be. I think it's an anti-blood coagulant. So here's some QAnon memes that were posted. So Hillary Clinton was a major target of QAnon, and she was alleged to be part of this deep state that was harvesting children's blood. You can see some other folks in here. So we've got the Queen. We have Anderson Cooper's mother. I can't remember her name.
Gloria Vanderbilt.
Thank you. I knew someone would know. But these are all so these images on the left are signs, like anytime one of these ruling elites or these what they call ruling elite, but these kind of world leaders, whenever they're on camera, not looking their best, or if they've got, a black eye or a blemish, adherents to QAnon will use that and say, "Oh, that's yeah, exactly. That's evidence, right? Of that you're out of your supply of adrenochrome. So so you better top off, right? I'm going to the doctor and I'm getting a re-up right now. So but anyway, but yeah, so now the danger of this, of course, is that when you view your political opponents in this way, when you other them, when you make them into literal demons, you can justify a lot of stuff, right? And that's the real danger of this, is it provides the people who adhere to this, the believers, a kind of justification for engaging in real world violence. And that's kind of what I'm really interested in. Is there's been quite a few murders, quite a few large incidents happen, and the people seem to be motivated by QAnon. I'd be amiss if I didn't say that there is part of me that's concerned that the shooting that took place at the parade yesterday might have been somehow involved in it, but I have no evidence for that, and I'm still waiting for it. All right, so what is it all building to? Well, part of QAnon mythos is this idea of the storm. And so for people who were at January 6th, they were basically awaiting the storm, right? Which is this apocryphal event where Donald Trump is going to take down all of his enemies. There will be a release of futuristic space age technology, including time travel, by the way, that we were going to have unlimited wealth and prosperity, right? This sounds really great, right? Sign me up, except for the part where we have to kill people. The other reason I wanted to show this image too, by the way, is on January 6th, I remember it vividly, but I did not necessarily see what a lot of people saw. I saw the markings of subcultures. So my main area of study is music subcultures and kind of underground social movements. And what stood out to me was I saw a lot of iconography that you might see at any rock concert, right? That you might see at kind of a different setting. And so I look at QAnon using that kind of framework of subcultures and social movements. And so that kind of takes me to my theoretical framework about how I unpack Q. So first, there's this huge scholarship on right-wing extremism that's been getting a lot of attention in the last 10 years. One of the things that the right has been really adept at making use of is culture, right? So Steve Bannon, who there's signs that his fingers are maybe in this QAnon stuff. I'm specifically referring to some of the claims made by the documentarian Colbert, the documentarian that did the HBO series Q Into the Storm, where he covers some of this. So if you're interested, go check that out. But culture has been this kind of area that the right wing has seized upon. So it started out right-wing, far-right groups, and I'm talking like neo-Nazi groups, were doing metal shows and doing punk rock concerts. And basically the idea was we need to give people something more than just what we're already selling to come, right? To basically make this kind of extremist, this kind of far-right extremism fun. And so they've been doing a lot of work on that. And one of if any of you are familiar with Gamergate, that was kind of born out of this attempt to make far-right politics far more palatable, right? And the role of new technologies cannot be overlooked here, right? The new technologies have enabled these kind of movements to form and coalesce in ways that they couldn't before online. And now we're just starting to see their real world impact. Secondly, I look at the Frankfurt School, which they're a group of Jewish intellectuals who were very much interested in Hitler's rise to power and how he used propaganda and culture as a way to indoctrinate the the German people into hating Jews. And I see some of the same earmarkers to what they were finding in the 1940s and 1930s to what I'm finding today. And then lastly, one of the things that I kind of brand myself as is a cultural criminologist. So one of the main courses that I teach at Mizzou is criminology. And one of the things that we do talk about in that class is about how culture shapes how we think about the criminal justice system, right? And how we respond to it. And also reasons, drives, rationalizations, and motives criminals carry with them that are a product of our culture. So this kind of culture piece, pretty big for me. So what have I done? This needs updated. I have probably consumed roughly around 1,000 hours worth of content over the last 3 years related to QAnon. I'm just new to my Twitter account because I was done with it. But this includes, videos on YouTube, DLive. So DLive is one of these like free speech alternative sites. There's a number of others, Odyssey, etc. There's Facebook groups. There was just a recent report that came out that said that Facebook is still profiting off of QAnon-related content and material. So if you're noticing a kind of sudden uptick on stuff that you're seeing on your feeds, yes, you're not alone. Twitter still remains one of the main places where a lot of QAnon content is being kind of filtered through, et cetera. And I'm also indebted to the work of a lot of investigative journalists who I'm now either friends with or, have at least conversed somewhat with about their work. And it's good work too. One of the things that surprises a lot of people, again, talking about this culture piece, I don't think QAnon would have been exceptionally, prominent, I guess, or I don't think it would have been so popular had it not been for the role of yoga studios and other alternative forms of spirituality that led into QAnon. And so one of the papers I have looks at this concept called conspirituality, right? Which is a kind of word splice between conspiracy and spirituality. And this involves yogis, new age gurus, wellness and fitness influencers, but also psychics, numerology, also known as gematria, is a huge part of QAnon. And that's just this process where you change letters of words into numbers, which then has some kind of correlation with something. And most of the time I've found them lying about what numbers they're actually using. But we can talk about that in the Q&A. But really what's going on here is I want to advance this concept, or I try to advance this concept in my work about commodified or domesticated resistance. So it's the concept we talk a lot about within social movements or within the sociology of culture, when we talk about how culture is co-opted and commodified and the fun basically sucked out of it. But this is a kind of example of cultural appropriation, right? Hijacking the really valuable message and valuable insights from areas like yoga and turning it into something and exploiting that for right-wing purposes is it's an example of cultural appropriation. It's not usually what we think of when we think of that term, but that's really what's going on here. And this process basically removes all the politically dissident features, right? And it kind of makes it more palatable to mass audiences, right? So I think QAnon is a great example of this because it's actually not anything new, right? This is actually a very old anti-Semitic trope, right? That is known as the Elders of the Protocols of Zion, right? Which is a ages-old Russian conspiracy theory against Jewish people meant to incite hatred and violence to them. And for whatever reason, this is like one of these texts that just won't go away. It just keeps coming back. Also, I did a little archival research in the library. Elon Musk's grandfather apparently reproduced some of this in some of his writing. This idea that Jewish people are trafficking people, children specifically, to drink their blood. You know, it's what's the old saying? It's old wine in new bottles. But at the same time, one of the things that I'm kind of arguing in my work is by packaging it up in this way, this made it really easy to do media stories about. So even though there's some evidence to suggest that belief in QAnon may not be as widespread as we thought initially, it still has mainstreamed and still put out there some of these anti-Semitic, racist, homophobic ideas. And so in that way, QAnon has been really successful, right? Because I don't need to go on Twitter anymore to find out what the conspiracy theorists are saying. I can turn on Fox News. I can turn on OAN. I can turn on Right Side Broadcasting, which are all pretty big media outlets, and find out exactly what's going on. I'm starting to see now some of the things that were on kind of these archaic message boards filter into the mainstream news cycle. So that's the part that's really scary for me, is I can now see what started out over here as a fringe idea being really put in front of the American people, and the world for that matter too. All right. So one of the things that I've looked at is this idea of authoritarianism. So what you find when you read the literatures of authoritarianism, of fascism, and conspiracy theories is that they all kind of occupy the same space, right? They're all kind of, because they're all basically ideas that nobody wants to touch with a 10-foot pole if they can avoid it. And as a result, they make for great bedfellows. And so so there's 9 what we call authoritarian traits within people who study authoritarianism. I chose just 3 to highlight that I found across the different segments of QAnon that I follow. This idea of submission to uncritical acceptance to authoritarianism, right? Submission to this kind of I put mystical here, but kind of this godlike figure. Trump idealized that idea. Aggression to those who violate conventional values. So there's this real rigid adherence that those who are susceptible to authoritarianism and fascist ideology hold. And one of those is this aggression toward those who violate conventional values. So the kind of groomer rhetoric that we're seeing, the rhetoric towards the border, and the great replacement theory, these ideas are all attacking those who violate what people within QAnon consider conventional values. And then the last kind of trait that I found across these different groups was this the role of mysticism and stereotype. This idea that the leaders of these groups they have this, they kind of promote this idea that only they can save them. So Trump said this quite a bit throughout his campaign. Only I can save America. And then this other idea that everyone else who opposes me is your enemy, right? And this is key too, because this is really where fascism kind of seeps in, right? Because if you can paint your political enemy as other, as opposite, as less than, dehumanized, right? You can justify a lot of stuff. And if you read some of the testimony in the court proceedings of people who have been convicted for crimes, well, I won't go into those because it's kind of heavy. But what you find is that they have this belief that they were totally justified in what they were doing because they were, they had this what seemed like to them a perfectly rational reason that their children were aliens and whatnot. I'm going to skip over. So I have some notes on the different kind of alternative spirituality and some different concepts. But one of the things that I've kind of been harping on is this idea of us versus them, right? And you see this throughout QAnon. You see a lot of music subcultures too, right? So in some of the studies of like the jazz musicians talk about how jazz musicians often try to create a boundary between those who are part of the band and those who aren't, right? To distinguish themselves from the participants and the audience. And you also see this in QAnon, right? This idea of us versus them. They have a kind of binary thinking about dark and light, right? You're either on the side of good or you're on the side of evil. You're either a non, which are those anonymous posters on those message boards, or you're a normie, right? Waiting to be woke up to the realities of what's really going on, right? And then there's this idea of red pilling and pilling, which is just this process, this idea that you have to proselytize the movement to others to get people in, which is kind of an interesting idea for me. I grew up in a Protestant household. That's a very kind of Protestant idea that you have to save souls for, Jesus or whatever. And you see that same kind of logic being applied here. So the other thing that I do in my work is I distinguish between different levels of belief. Because there are people who have different motivations for these, engaging in this kind of participation. So first is the true believers, and Ashley Babbitt, Jacob Angeli, before he went to jail, I would say was a true believer. He may still be. He's recently turned to run for political office, and his I guess shtick has kind of changed a bit, and he feels a bit more like a used car salesman, if I'm being honest, or a politician, really. But he's changed a little bit. Edgar Madison Welch is the guy who drove to Comet Ping Pong in Washington, D.C., armed, looking for a basement that wasn't there. I have ate there though, and they have really great pizza. So if you're in the DC area, check it out. But these people really do believe in this ideology, and oftentimes what you find, and there's been some recent analysis of the January 6th arrestees. About 70% of them had some kind of real significant trauma in their life, like loss of a child, loss of job, major divorce, these kinds of things. And they, in some ways, they seem like they're relying on QAnon to solve problems in their own life, or to make themselves not feel as failures, right? And so it's these people who I'm most concerned about, because I feel like they've been victimized by people not acting in good faith. And those people are the grifters, who are people who have made money off QAnon. And again, this is part of a larger right-wing or alt-right strategy. So this image I took from a QAnon promoter. It's on his webpage. And I took it just not for like any specific bit of information, other than the fact that they recognize that they can build their own information ecosystem that is also profitable, right? And that they're very well aware that they need to basically make money off of this, because making money off of this is good for the movement, right? And so this is I guess what I'm trying to say is this isn't just luck or happenstance. This is purposeful, right? This particular influencer made a lot of money over COVID selling basically bleach tablets to people as a cure for COVID. And then lastly, political operatives. So, and of course, these are the people I'm most upset with, because these are people who should have the knowledge to know better, and it's getting more and more obvious that they're really just trying to milk this for votes. But in 2020, there was 24 congressional candidates. I don't know that anybody's done a tally yet for this upcoming election. There are some signs that using QAnon as a political strategy is wearing very thin. However, right, we did just have a mass caravan to the southern border, which was promoted by the same people who organized the trucker convoy, which was part of QAnon. So there's still, I guess what I would say, elements of QAnon still out there, still very active, still organizing. Yeah, I'll end with some things that I think are at work that aren't so obvious. So one of the things that I write about is the role of platforms and their responsibility in all of this. And so one of the things that YouTube, Facebook, Google, and a lot of companies did is they switched from an algorithm. They switched to an algorithm that promotes engagement, irregardless of whether or not that engagement was positive or negative. And one of the things that researchers are now having to kind of piece together in retrospect, what we found is that inflammatory remarks get the most engagement, right? So negative emotions get the most engagement. And so, and you can try this out if you want. Create your own YouTube account, right? That's blank, it's fresh. Follow one or two right-wing radio talk show hosts, and very quickly you're going to start to see conspiracy theories pop up in your feed related to all kinds of things. I get some of the most interesting stuff in my feed these days because of what I look at. But this has produced a kind of information echo chamber, right? Where it's not necessarily stuff we already agree with, but it's stuff that it's stuff that takes our already existing positions, puts them through a funhouse mirror, and then serves it back to us, so that we become kind of parodies of ourselves. So in conclusion, it's part of this larger symptom of right-wing extremism. You can see basically footprints of QAnon everywhere. I'm working on a paper on QAnon in sport. I've written a paper on QAnon and basically yoga, yogis and psychics, etc. There's a colleague of mine, we're going to be working on a paper on electronic dance music in QAnon, which is one place we never thought we would see it pop up. So it really is kind of everywhere if you look hard enough. But I think it's a symptom of a much larger problem, right? Like the things pop up in society because of something that is already there. So QAnon does tap into this kind of political unrest that we have and the dissatisfaction we have with politicians and political leaders who just can't seem to get anything done that helps everyone, right? QAnon taps into the failure of our medical system to protect us over COVID, but also, takes advantage of people who, have horrible diseases. So there are, of course, kernels of truth, right? And those are the points where I think we can connect with people who have fallen into this movement and try to reach them, to bring them back into I guess a more reasonable kind of dialogue so that we can work through some of these issues. The issue is, of course, QAnon likes to basically weaponize these people toward minorities, right? And then again, I think this is a multi-paradigmatic approach is what I have. It's not just, it's weird to me that I'm one of the only sociologists writing about this. I've found some comfort within people in library sciences, within philosophy, within all kinds of different disciplines. Yeah, we really need a much more robust approach because it's not just one discipline, I think, that's going to be able to figure out how to solve this problem. And I'll basically leave it at that and open it up for any questions folks might have.
Lots of hands up already, so right over here.
Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it. Is there any evidence that these people seek out evidence of their own as they're trying to make sense of this, or do they just assimilate it into their confusion of what it's really like?
So when you say evidence,
well,
what do you because like
I would hope that we're teaching college students these days to seek out and find reliable, credible sources. But if we keep politicizing the media, and I mean, where do they go for what is a reliable source, and who gets to determine what is a reliable source? My other question has to do: is there any research on the education level of the people that seem to be most susceptible to being sucked into conspiracy theories?
So let me take. Oh, I actually got okay. Ooh, this is a good question. So I would so if I never hear the phrase "do your own research" again, I'll die happy. So members of the movement or adherents to the movement believe they are doing their own research, right? And so I think both parts of this question are really intertwined nicely. So now, one of the things that they will do is this like kind of dismissive tactic where if you bring them something from the CDC, well, that can't possibly be true because XYZ, right? And frankly, I see sometimes that happens within academic disputes within science, right? Where people just say, well, how do I know? And so, yeah, it's a huge problem. And I think the kind of underlying thing is in a society, we have to have some consensus on what we're going to agree on or the thing's not going to work, right? The other part of your question about educational levels. So there's a paper that a young grad student is submitting for my edited volume, and he's got to do some work on it, but he divided up his sample by two groups, right? White college-aged men with a professional degree and everyone else. And what he found was that the white college-aged men with a professional degree more likely to believe in conspiracy theories.
Oh my God.
Right? It was shocking. So I hesitate bringing it up because he needs to iron out some things with this analysis, but it's really interesting and I can't wait to publish it.
We're all traumatized.
What's that? Probably. We're all, everybody who studies this stuff is a little broken in some way. Yeah, right behind you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've had some experience with wellness providers who were anti-vaxxers,
Yeah.
refused to wear masks, things like that. Yet they were very liberal. You know, they were politically liberal, but still believed in these conspiracy theories. And I'm just wondering how that happened. How did they? Why are wellness providers so we're supposed to be all about health? Conspiracy theory believers when it comes to things like masking and vaccines.
So let me take this by a couple parts. So one is when I wrote a paper on this, and it's out there and it's free to the public. But so remember when I talked about cultural appropriation? So one thing that happened within these wellness groups, and there's some things in the literature that you can read about if you want to do a deep dive on this. There are a lot of people out in California that could not find their dream job being a $1 million paid actor. And so a lot of those people needed to get creative for job purposes, right? And so they became yoga instructors. And they took a lot of their skills from entertainment and transposed them into wellness, right? Which some of those skills, and I say this as someone who worked in the entertainment industry, they're great for selling tickets and getting people in the door, but it's not necessarily the best for getting the right info out there. Right. And so there's been this kind of co-optation, I think, of the wellness industry by people seeking to profit off of it. And there's some really well-known fitness influencers, for example, who basically lied their pants and have for years trying to convince people to buy supplements or workout regimens that weren't based in science. But here's the other thing. There's this kind of back and forth within the scholars who study authoritarianism, and it's still contested whether or not authoritarianism and fascism can manifest itself from a left-leaning perspective, or can it look like a leftist position? And my argument is that yes, absolutely. These areas, some of these cultural areas, again, like yoga, wellness, even psychics to some extent, right? They look left, right? Or at least, when I was going to the crystal shops when I was a young little goth kid, those were what I would have considered leftist spaces, right? And but authoritarianism can manifest itself everywhere. And what it does in those spaces is it latches on to those countercultural tendencies, that tendency to reject authority and, established forms or established institutions. And so it looks like it's very rebellious, right? But it's not, right? It's really upholding the status quo. Did that answer your question? Okay.
I mean, with the people I know.
I mean, well, and again, as someone who grew up with interesting characters in my life, let's just put it that way. I don't completely understand it myself, but I just know that it is, right?
We have a couple of questions. Excuse me, we have a couple of questions from the chat. One is, what is replacement theory, I guess?
Okay, so replacement theory is and I've read about this on Salon, if you want to look up that article. But replacement theory was established by a gay French socialite named Renard Camus. And in France, it was, it's the same in either country, but it's this idea that immigrants are coming into one's country and diluting or they're changing the voting population, right? So they're here it's this idea that people from Mexico are immigrating to the United States, and that's eventually going to shift the demographics of the country and the votes. So conservatives used it as this kind of fear mongering that Democrats are trying to make immigration more loose so that they can win more elections.
What about the Charlottesville people who talk about Jews going out?
So that's part of it too, right? In fact, I guess the original replacement theory, you could go all the way back to Nazi Germany, because this is the same rhetoric, the same logic that Hitler used to demonize Jewish people. Good catch.
Then a couple of other things. Someone asked this morning on a podcast, a journalist said he thought sometimes conspiracy theories were used to provide comfort. And some of the things you've referred to, have you seen this?
So Mark famously wrote, religion is the side of the oppressed creature, right? And what he was trying to say was, religion is an expression of real human suffering, right? And that's exactly what this is. This is an expression of real human suffering. If you drive to places like the Appalachians, places hard hit by the opioid crisis, places that, deaths of despair, right? The increase of suicide by opioids, by drug use, by alcohol, by guns. These are all areas, like, this is an expression of this, right? However bizarre this might seem to us, right? For a lot of people who have bought into these ideas, they're really struggling. And there are places in this country that I've drove through that, you can tell people just forgot. And it's sad.
I have a question about, it seems to me that what underlies a lot of this is either the inability to trust or the trust information from standard, references, or inability to trust the people that are in authority. And I don't understand how that fits with authoritarianism. I think of authoritarianism being follow the leader, but this is consciously saying don't follow the people who are leading the country, don't follow the media elites, don't follow the president, the current president.
So, I mean, that's how populism takes hold, right? Is they, like let's ignore reality for a second and let's look at, what candidate Trump said in 2016, right? All the promises that he made. Like, and again, I had relatives like this who lived in parts of Indiana, who, where factories had pulled out, where jobs had disappeared, and along comes someone selling some really good things that they want, right? And then there's another party, right, that comes along and starts talking about things that they just don't understand, right? That, like, why are they talking about all these gay issues? Why are they talking about, this feminist stuff, right? And not only that, but then they tell them that, oh, hey, and these people talking about this feminism stuff, these are the people that are making your life hell, right? And so when you present it that way, it seems pretty attractive. And I can understand how they could get sucked in.
We've got several questions here, more than I can write. And I'm going to give you a couple, and you can kind of, what percentage of adult Americans are into this theory? Everyone has friends, neighbors who have gone down the rabbit hole recently. To what extent do you think this is a consequence of the pandemic?
So I'm glad somebody brought this up. There's a recent report released that says that actually it's not belief in conspiracy that's increased, meaning, and so their analysis is very compelling. And basically it says belief in conspiracies remain about the same over time. About 1/3 of the American population believes in some form of conspiracy theory. Yeah. Except when you look at who shot JFK and 9/11. Those two are like major conspiracy theories that way more people believe in. At one point, there was a poll done by Axios Ipsos that said that roughly 33% of Republicans agree with some statement that was part of QAnon. Bottom line is we just really don't know, right? And we do know that our fear of conspiracy theorists is up, right? And that may be what I think is driving a lot of concern for folks, but just the fact that there's like in social problems, which is a class we teach in sociology, the definition of a social problem is either a problem for a lot of people, right, in society, or a few people who have a lot of power have a problem with something, right? And so it may be there's a small group of people who have access to resources who are creating a lot of problems.
And then there's two more similar. Do you think that the inherent human trait of tribalism, the distrust of the other, can ever be overcome? And then another question was about how do we get rid of this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, so if I had the ability to solve the problem, I probably would be multi-millionaire. Yes, well, yeah, and you know, I'm in sociology, so we're not very good at that. But yeah, I think alienate, like, yes, these are all things that are leading to this, but I think you have to look at the way our society's been structured, right, as the reason for this. So social media is really great at turning us inward, right? And it's really great at tapping into some of our, I guess, more base aspects or more carnival-esque aspects of our nature. So I think you have to look at that. I think you also have to look at the fact that Americans are working more hours now than ever, right? Which, if you're doing that, how you have time to engage in, you know, your local community. There's just a whole host of other factors, right? But I think to solve the problem, we need to get back to the local, right? And offer more opportunities locally for people to meet one another, to get to know each other, right? To have a dialogue.
So I would imagine QAnon folks don't believe Biden won the election. With them. But here's my question: since they don't believe in institutions, do you think these people vote? Yeah, exactly.
So this is a question that I see keep coming up in the media. It's kind of an interesting conundrum that the Republican Party has created for itself. The election was stolen, but also we want you to vote in the election. Yeah. So, but here's the thing, just like how I said, these types of vague conspiracy theories are also really interesting, right? Because if he loses, right, and I'm talking about the presumed candidate Trump, right? If he loses, well, that's because the institution failed, right? If he wins, see, he's popular. We love him. Everybody loves him, right? So it's just like Taylor Swift. You know, if we won the Super Bowl, it was a deep state conspiracy. If we lost the Super Bowl, it was a deep state conspiracy.
Today's political cartoon with Patrick Mahomes sitting in the chair and saying, I love the deep state.
Yeah.
He wins either way. So I have I was fascinated by a recent movie, Leave the World Behind, whose executive producers, there was a whole gamut of them, but the Obamas. The message being that, one, isolation. So between social media, and we've talked to a number of college-age students who don't even know how to make friends anymore, real friends. And then pair that with COVID. So there's a lot of isolation. And then the next component was chaos. We have plenty of that. And then leading to either an outright civil war or destruction in some way when you, and so I think the message of leave the world behind was too manyfold, multifold. Where do we go? Mars or the moon or something and live, or but leave that behind and do what? And I'm curious with that, how your students respond to things like this, because they're the next great hope. I mean, I hate to play all the young people, but if their eyes aren't opened to,
So the kids give me hope. Some of them. All right. There are young folk who are mobilizing, and a lot of it I think goes unnoticed because they have their own way of creating that we're not this. I'm a little more privy to it than I think most people, because since I've got here, I've like really tried to figure out where that resistance is. But there's also, even like on a kind of national level, this kind of movement activity going on. The issue is they're very distrustful of anyone over the age of really 29. Like that's even maybe too old, right? And the issue is, you know, those who came before us have knowledge and wisdom about how to get to where you want to be. And so they're not necessarily listening to folks who are older than them. So look, I don't want to get sucked into a conversation about geopolitical politics, but like even Bernie Sanders to some of these folks is now considered a demon.
really,
Because of his he didn't take a stance early enough against Israel Palestine, and for them that was awful. How could you do this, right? And I'm sitting here going, okay, I know you may not, you may not be 100% what you're after or agree with you on every point, but and that's the issue that I see within this kind of new formation of what you might call the new left, right? I guess the new, right? But is they don't really, they're very distrustful of old folks who are older than them, and especially folks who are older than them and have, or who they perceive to have power, right? So
we'll have to draw our own conclusions about how good or how bad that is. Thank you very, very much. We've come to the end of our time.
So what's the name of your book going to be again?
So it's Extremism and Conspiracy Theory in the New Times.
And it's a collection
I'm
of
seeing if we're live. Screw. It'll come out as what's called a library copy first, but within a year it's going to be re-released as a paperback for a much more affordable price. There's an ebook version that's cheaper. academics don't mind writing books, right? We do it for the love. I would advise people to get the ebook, or wait until the soft cover comes out. Failing that, pop me an email, I'll figure out something. Oh, but your question was, yeah, it's 17 chapters of different from different authors. We cover everything from real conspiracy theories like COINTELPRO, to the moon landing, to QAnon, to the Proud Boys, pretty much everything that is negatively impacting our politics right now.
Is it an academic text or will we understand it?
Is it? Well, I practice what I call down there with sociology. So I've tried to make the chapters accessible for anybody who wants to read about this stuff.
Cool. Thank you.